Hello everyone, my name is Dakota Hancock. This is for English 2112, Section 3, with Professor Stephen Fuller. This assignment is on Thomas Mann, with focus on A Death in Venice. We will begin with a little bit on the life of Thomas Mann. Thomas Mann was notoriously known as the greatest German novelist of the 20th century. To begin a little bit with his early life, he was born on June 6, 1875, to a grain merchant in Lübeck, Germany, which is a northern port town. His father died early on when he was 16, which put a lot of pressure on his success. However, he failed 2 years of high school, graduating in 1894. While most would find this a failure, Thomas Mann found it exhilarating knowing a lot of his parents' expectations would fall off of his shoulders. He wrote his life-changing piece Fallen in 1896, which is what steered him in the direction of literature. Moving on with a little bit of some of his works, Thomas Mann is most famously known for Buddenbrooks, The Magic Mountain, and Death in Venice. He won the Nobel Prize in 1929 for his 1924 work, The Magic Mountain. Moving on to his exile and life during World War I and World War II, Thomas Mann remained a prominent speaker during both World Wars. Although he shared conservative values during the First World War, his views changed drastically with the rise of Nazis. Going into self-exile in 1933 to Switzerland, then to the United States in 1938. He became a full U.S. citizen in 1944. However, he left the country again in 1952 back to Switzerland after conflict, where he died shortly after in 1955. Moving on, we will discuss some of his works and his style and what influenced him. Thomas Mann primarily wrote in the tradition of psychological realism, often taking the cultural and spiritual crises of Europe during his lifetime as his subjects. He does take a lot of mythology and romanticism as influences. Mann uses Greek, Roman, and Indian mythological allusions in many texts, particularly Grecian gods, to depict people, emotions, and events. Mann's language is highly romantic, as beauty and nature remain prominent themes in his works, particularly that of Death in Venice, which will be discussed a little bit later. Psychological realism remains his main genre. It was popularized in the 19th and 20th century. This genre highly focuses on the motivational and internal thoughts of characters in fictional works. The author of these fictional stories will use their characters to express their opinions on a societal or political issue through the choices of those characters. Moving on to his influences continued. Philosophy and philosophers in general had high influence on Mann's work, specifically those of Arthur Schopenhauer, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Richard Wagner. For Schopenhauer influenced his work through his vision of the artist's suffering and development. Nietzsche for his viewpoint of a diseased artist overcoming chaos to produce art through discipline and skill rather than overwhelming passion. And Richard Wagner for embodying the artist who controls all aspects of his work, including that of lyrics, music, and down to the very staging of his operas. Continuing on to the focus of this piece, we will focus on Death in Venice. A little bit of background knowledge on this piece. Death in Venice was written during pre-World War I in 1912, following a vacation Mann had taken in Italy. The story has a sense of impending doom throughout its pages as the main protagonist falls deep into a passionate abyss from which there is no escape. The city itself corrupts him, and his own skewed judgment sends him spiraling down the path of ill repute. A brief summary of the novella. The story's main character, famed author Gustav von Aschenbach, is a well-disciplined master of literature. His works have won him great fame, which he personally owns to his own labor and work ethic. Never giving in to passion, emotion, or pleasantries, even in his youth, Aschenbach is infatuated with his own success. Eventually, he is struck by wanderlust and vacations to Venice, where a 14-year-old Polish boy, Tadzio, steals his heart. A boy he calls beautiful, carved by the gods themselves, Aschenbach loses his sense of propriety and discipline, following into the artist's abyss. Consumed by passion for the beauty of the young boy, Aschenbach becomes a hollow of his former self, depraved by his obsession. Losing himself to the idea of beauty, Aschenbach loses his sense of judgment and becomes his demise. This piece will focus on a paragraph near the end of the story. It is Socrates to Phaedrus, and it goes as such. For you must know that we poets cannot walk the path of beauty without Eros joining our company and even making himself our leader. Indeed, heroes though we may be after our own fashion, disciplined warriors though we may be, still we are as women, for passion is our exaltation, and our longing must ever be for love. That is our bliss and our shame. Do you see, then, that we poets can neither be wise nor honorable, that we necessarily go astray, that we necessarily remain dissolute adventurers of emotion? The masterly demeanor of our style is a lie and a folly, our fame and our honor a sham. The confidence accorded us by our public utterly ridiculous, the education of the populace and of the young by means of art a risky enterprise that ought not to be allowed. But form and ingenuousness, Phaedrus, lead to intoxication and to desire, might lead the noble soul to horrible emotional outrages that his own lovely discipline would reject as infamous, lead him to the abyss. This is from Death in Venice, which can be found in the Norton Anthology of World Literature, Volume F, 3rd edition, on page 136 and 137. So, open to interpretation, I'm going to take Art in the Abyss, an idea influenced by Socrates' own work. Thematically, Mann uses art as Aschenbach's well-honed skill rather than passion. Throughout the novel, Aschenbach's skill is plagued by his ever-growing passion through exposure to the beauty of Tadzio. As his decorum dwindles due to his increasing passion, the speech Socrates gives to Phaedrus becomes ever more evident. Art is the abyss. Whether an artist allows themselves to be thrown into that abyss belies in their interpretation of beauty and art. Socrates warns that to give in to the pleasures of art, to allow one to disperse themselves too deeply in the beauty besought by the artist, will find their demise. Beauty becomes a very fickle thing. It is the only thing an artist can create physically and mentally. It is a consuming temptress. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned a little bit about Thomas Mann and his influence on work today. And here are my works cited.